Hello and welcome back to The Creatives, everybody, where we explore creativity through conversation. And as you know, every great thing began with a conversation. I'm your host, Ramsey, and I'm joined today by entrepreneur, athlete, racing driver, and probably many more things, Marc Lafleur.
Dude, happy to be here, man.
Thanks for being here, man. Marc and I connected through the world of motorsports, and we've worked on a few video projects together over the years. And most recently, we found ourselves in Montreal at the Canadian Grand Prix in the same room as seven-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, where Marc was on a discussion panel with Lewis Hamilton talking about theme Mavericks of Motorsport. So in this episode, we're going to continue our exploration of creativity through learning about Marc, his accomplishments, his roadblocks, and his inspiring journey. And also, he has a pretty powerful mindset, which I'm very intrigued to tap into and learn a little bit more about. And we hope that by the end of this episode, you have one more piece to your puzzle, that is creativity. So before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsors. Thank you to Pano Media for powering this production. Pano Media is your trusted source for video production. So if you have a story to tell, a brand to promote, or just a creative idea, make sure to reach out to them. Big shout out also to our editor, Ryan, and thank you to Midnight Hour Studios for this lovely space that we record in. Midnight Hour Studios is your trusted location in the heart of Ottawa. It's your blank canvas studio space, and they're offering you, the listener and viewer, 25% off your first booking. So all of that will be down in the description below. And one more thing, if you're listening and not subscribed, make sure to subscribe so that you can hear these episodes when they come out first. Helps us on our end, and it helps you get the content as soon as it's out. So thanks, Marc. Thanks for being here, man.
Man, I'm happy to be here. We go way back, and you've done a lot in terms of kind of trying to bring some of my visions to life with what we do with the recording. So I'm happy now to be on your platform and do this. So
cool,
let's dive in.
Yeah, let's dive in. So as you may already know, the theme of the podcast is creativity. It's a vast topic that the exploration will never end. So the goal was to just kind of see people's perspectives and how they deploy creativity in their lives. And we're doing that through conversation, through asking questions. And I hope to learn a little bit about how you've been creative in your life, as I know, but, to kind of share that with the world about how you creatively approached carving your own way, paving your own way, becoming an author, a racing driver. There's so many hats that I feel like you've worn, and you've done it in such a way that's like, you make it look easy in a way. So I'm sure it's not. I'm sure there's a lot that goes into it behind. So I'm kind of pumped to learn in. But before we dive into that, I'd like to just kind of bring it back to the origin story of you, of Marc Lafleur. If there were to be a movie of your life, these would be like the main scenes, the main chapters of your life. So if you could kind of share with us your origin story, and then we'll kind of dive into more creative topics and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I guess, kind of the Coles notes really, in summary, I struggled a lot in high school. I was a big gamer growing up. Video games were kind of my life. And I think that it was the thing at that time that I really was applying myself to. It wasn't something that drove me to do something greater or go bigger or anything like that. But at the time it was like all that mattered. And, in high school as a kid, if you're not being super social, you probably have these kind of like make-believe worlds that you're just, enjoying. And, gaming did a lot of that for me. So, in high school, the first half, grade 9 and 10, I pretty much kind of like failed most of my classes. I would say more than half of my classes I failed. And it wasn't until grade 10, 11, and I did a victory lap, so grade 13, that I kind of started turning things around. And there's like a whole story there, but really it was football that kind of changed my whole life. And it was because football was the only thing or was the first thing at least, that came into my life that I cared for more than anything else. Like, it was really the thing that gave me a reason to wake up in the morning. It was something that I could see myself giving myself to. Like, it was the only thing that mattered. I lived and breathed it. And I got a lot of learnings from that. Obviously I had it was amazing to just be an athlete, and be part of a team, and especially when you were struggling in school, to kind of have that camaraderie. And that led me to play in university. So I was at the University of Waterloo. So that was kind of another chapter in my life, where I was still very much like a C's, get degrees type kid, but at least I was social. Like, university was really good for me because it was kind of like that clear slate. When I was struggling in grade 9 and 10, I did have this transition, and, you know, I found a great group of friends. I always say my friends adopted me in grade 10. And then, you know, my life kind of turned around a bit, and, you know, I was able to go to parties, and, you know, it wasn't so much this like weird kid in the corner type thing. Like, it was actually, I could go out and have a good time and be confident, but everybody still knew who I was. I was still this, you know, Dark Mark, you know, that was the nickname that I got in high school.
That name was birthed in high school?
Oh, it was birthed in high school, but it was also birthed from people that I hated. So that was like a name they used to just call me, like, they would just call me Dark Mark as like, you know, like, okay, like Dark Mark, like, you know, that shithead kid or whatever. And by the time I graduated high school, though, it had completely changed. Like, people knew Mark as Dark Mark, but it wasn't like this like sort of insult or anything like that. It was like I kind of made that name for myself. And this joke was that at the time I didn't really have these like giant ambitions or anything, but I always promised that I was going to keep that name, because the way it was, I have a huge chip on my shoulder, and it was like, one day you're going to hear about Mark and you'll be like, oh, like Dark Mark, and you're going to hear that he made it. And you'd be like, damn, that kid that we used to rip on and call him Dark Mark, now he's made it. So even my, you know, my Instagram is Dark Mark _ you know, I have an email that's still Dark _ Mark _ essentially, long story short, getting into university, I was able to kind of just restart from scratch. And because I now, you know, I understood, you know, how to have a good time, and I understood how to make friends, it was just kind of this like this entire new world of opportunity for me to kind of live a new life. And that's what university did for me. And I got to do that at the University of Waterloo, and didn't really care at all about my classes. I was just there to play football. That's all that really mattered. And in grade 9 and 10, you know, or sorry, not grade 9 and 10, but first and second year university, it was just like anything else. You know, I just wanted to go party and have a good time and play football. And, you know, I was on academic probation pretty much every other term. So if you go on academic probation twice, then you're out. So I did a really good job of, okay, I'm on academic probation. Let me buckle down, get the 50s that I need to get by. And then, okay, next term I can kind of, you know, have some fun again. And then I go back on academic probation. So it's hilarious, and what's even more funny is now I actually have a really good relationship with the university. I'm actually on the Dean's Council, which is ironic. So
that's amazing. That's such like a movie story of like, you know, playing the football, but you got to get the grades to make it to the homecoming game. Like, I'm just thinking of like some like TV shows.
For sure.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a joke too. And I can talk about, you know, the education system through and through, but, you know, I find it crazy because when I was in high school, in those last few years, I was playing football, and I remember I still struggled in school. Like, I was still, you know, getting into trouble all the time. And I'll just never forget, you know, I know the vice principal there, Mr. McLeod, actually, we always, you know, we kind of butt heads and stuff like that. And I'll never forget, but he had threatened, I was doing something bad. I probably deserved it, but I was doing something bad. And he's like, well, listen, if you keep doing whatever you're doing, you're not going to play football for the school. And I find that ironic because I talk to a lot of parents nowadays whose kids, you know, they struggle in school, but the only thing they have going for them is sports.
Yeah.
And I just find it ironic that the school system's answer to that. So if a kid who's struggling is to threaten them with the one thing they are doing well and productive in school. So, you know, there's a whole conversation around that. But in university, you know, I was going through, and then it wasn't until I think about second year where it hit me like a rock. It was like the first time I actually was like, oh shit, like I've only really got 2 years left before I have to figure out my life. And I started thinking about what I wanted to do. And it was really this whole thing of, well, I'm a bad student. I don't necessarily even want to be a good student. I'm probably going to be a bad employee. And it was never like an inability to do the work. It's just I didn't care about the work. And if I don't care about the work, it's very hard for me to apply myself. And if I don't apply myself, how can you do good work, right? So I can imagine that having a boss that was telling me to do things that I didn't agree with or thought there was a better way, and me not being able to get those ideas across or try to express any creativity or find different ways of doing it was going to be bad. So fortunately, the University of Waterloo is a very entrepreneurial school. So that university really, you know, births a ton of founders and entrepreneurs, and there's a lot of support there. So that was kind of like my first introduction to the world of business. And then that kind of led to the next chapter, which was, you know, kind of me as a founder. So those are kind of like these big milestones. And I guess then, of course, then there's the True Local chapter and then the post True Local chapter. So, man, we'll be here all night if we could try to go into all of it. But yeah, that's kind of like the original origin story.
That's cool, man. So when you say Waterloo University was it supported entrepreneurship, How? Like, how's that even possible?
Yeah, so right off the bat, when I went there, I guess it would have been in 2009 actually, or maybe 2010. But that's when RIM was there. So the company that was doing BlackBerry.
Yeah.
So
they were based in Waterloo?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So that was in Waterloo, and they were pretty much like, I might as well just say that they were attached to the university. So they did a really good job of developing the co-op program. So you had a lot of computer science kids that come in and they immediately go and work for RIM. So the University of Waterloo right off the bat has this really comprehensive co-op program that really kind of tries to take its students and place them into working environments sooner rather than later. But in addition to that, because there are so many software engineers and their computer science program was so strong, you started just getting a lot of kids that were building apps. And of course, that would have been like, 2009 to 2014, give or take. That was that was the time to be building apps. And that was the time when Snapchat was blowing up and Tinder was coming out and all this type of stuff. So you had a lot of kids with a lot of ideas. And because there was a lot of money in Waterloo as well, because we had this giant tech company, you started seeing all of these organizations that were set up exclusively to help founders and entrepreneurs. So whether it was funded by the government or whether it was funded privately, you had all these accelerators and incubators. So like there's one called Communitech. The university had one called Velocity. So you now started seeing that not only is there this congregation of people who have the idea of wanting to start businesses and build businesses, you've got the talent there, but then you've also got the support and the infrastructure to help bring them along. And then of course, now you've got all of the stuff in place, and now you've got these collisions happening, which is these types of people all running into each other. And it just kind of elevates the vibe of the entire ecosystem. So that was essentially what kind of paved the way for Waterloo and Kitchener being known as the Silicon Valley of the North. And once again, I didn't even know about any of this until, second or third year. I don't know if you know the app Kik, but it was like an instant messaging app. Okay. Back in the day, it was a really big one. It was like one of the kind of like the darling childs of I guess, a Waterloo student. And I had no idea. Same thing. I had no idea what it even was, but I guess like on campus, it was just the biggest thing. So you just had a lot of these like kind of high flying founders, and it was just really well supported. Yeah.
Is that something? So would you say that kind of kickstarted you into founding True Local and putting it on your radar, or did you already kind of have it in you and you wanted to kind of pave your own way and be an entrepreneur before that?
Yeah, I wanted to make money, and I wanted to do it in a way. Well, first of all, I wanted to make as much as I could, and when you reverse engineer that, it's like, okay, well, what am I good at? At the end of the day, to make money, you got to be good at something. And I found that, my personality type, like I'm non-technical, right? So I don't code, but I like to think I'm a good problem solver. I can make things happen. Like we didn't have a lot of money growing up, right? So anything I ever wanted or anything we ever had to do, I had to like scrap for it. Even getting into university, I was, I knew that that's what I had to do. And because I was struggling so much in school, like that was a huge lift to go from failing all of your classes in grade 9 and 10 to getting into the University of Waterloo, which at the time was one of the most prestigious universities in the country. So I was used to like, okay, if I want something, I know that I'm not going to get it the easy way. So I'm going to have to kind of outwork the people around me. And what ended up happening was being in that environment with all these founders and all this, it inspired me because I saw the dollars flowing around. Like every week there was somebody who just raised $1 million or just the million, like the word million and the number of millions was just being thrown around so much because you had all these people, and it kind of just made that as this new standard that I was like, okay, well, why don't I go after this? And then of course, the fact that it was entrepreneurship and starting a business, I saw that. I'm like, wait a minute. So these are pretty much outcasts really at the end of the day who want to do something different or better. And they're taking all this risk. Nobody's telling them no. Yeah. Like no, they have no boss to be like, no, you can't do this or it's a bad idea. You pretty much get to double down on your own ideas with the deal, knowing that you will get all the glory, but you will take on all the risk. So it's like no one's going to tell you can't do it, but if you fail, you're going to fall flat on your face. But if you succeed, you get to put the work in to try to succeed as much as you want. So I think it was just kind of like this big pot, and it's a good metaphor for, I always talk about people are like, why are you the way you are? And it's like $1 million question. And I always say, I'm like, it's an impossible question, because really the way I look at life is, you've got this giant pot, like a giant stew pot or whatever. Okay. And all of your life experiences are like little ingredients that you're putting into this pot. Now, every life experience is its own ingredient, and how intense or how crazy that life experience was is like how much of the ingredient you're putting in. So you've got all these different ingredients that are different than you and different than the other people and different than everyone's got their own unique set of ingredients, but it's also how much of the ingredient that's in there. So it's impossible to predict that. And then in addition, you're stirring this pot, right? So you have this influence on all these things that have happened to you, all these ingredients that are going in, all these events that are going in. How fast are you stirring? You're stirring fast, you're stirring slow. When do you pour it out? And it's just this ongoing thing that makes you who you are. So it's not just one thing. You can throw your genetics in there, like maybe that's the type of pot you're using, right? Like there are all these things that go in to make you who you are, and some of them are easier to pinpoint and others aren't. So I think that just like for me, that sort of mix that was in that pot worked really well in that environment at that time.
That's cool. And it is, I guess it's a testament to like you are a product of your environment because you came up around what was happening. It did rub off on you. And if I understand correctly, you did go on to found True Local, which you then grew it pretty large. And do you still work with that company? You're still involved with True Local?
Yeah, no,
kind of moved on.
I'm done with True Local now. So essentially True Local, it was a 5-year run, literally to the day, exactly 5 years.
It's like today?
No, to the day.
Oh, like 5 years on. Okay,
yeah.
Okay,
we started the company on January 4th, and then exactly 5 years later, we announced that it was acquired on January 4th, which is wild. Like that's a whole story in and of itself. But yeah, essentially True Local was just, I had realized that entrepreneurship was what I wanted to do. Yeah. So I started my first company, which was this instant messaging app, which failed completely. I had no business experience. This was the day one. Like we pretty much heard that Snapchat was worth $3 billion. Now I was used to hearing the number million, but I never heard billion. And I'm like, okay, this is what we have to be. Like I kind of had this idea. I wanted to be a founder, but like now we got to do it. So no technical experience, no background, no marketing, no nothing. And we just went and started this company. It lasted about a year. And then I deleted all of our users accidentally. And it was we were pushing a boulder up a hill for so long that whenever I did that, it was like, oh my God, like we're just done with this. So then, I got the bug. I was like, this is what I want to do. So from there, I started another company called Dash Task, which was essentially a sharing economy platform. And the inspiration from this came from the fact that Uber and Airbnb were really starting to be popular in, 2014-ish. And the idea of the sharing economy, which is essentially taking a community's resources and just kind of like sharing them amongst one another for mutual benefits. So, the idea was essentially you could imagine that somebody needs their garbage taken out, or somebody needs to, have their dog walked, or needs help moving a couch or whatever. Craigslist in the US, TaskRabbit, Kijiji here were doing something similar, but there was no platform dedicated specifically for that in universities. So we figured we could take a proven business model, which is this idea of the sharing economy, and bring it into a niche market, which was the university sort of post-secondary area. And we did that, and it went well, and the business actually got some traction, but my co-founder ended up getting a job offer from Google. So can't compete with that. Yeah. So that one went down the drain. So I was already in this idea of, okay, I want to be a founder. And at the time I was doing door-to-door meat sales. So like we didn't have a lot of money. So I was working 4 jobs in university while being a student full-time, while playing football. So I was a personal trainer.
Did you sleep?
Yeah, not as much as I do now, but I got my sleep in. There were 3 of them were part-time jobs. Then one of them was the job that I was doing the door-to-door meat sales. Then when it kind of came around to it, I was like, man, we're getting these companies going. We don't know what we don't know, but considering we don't know a lot, we're making some progress. Why do they keep failing? Obviously they were unique circumstances, but really what it was that I was treating them like hobbies. It was nights and weekends because I was working full time.
Right.
And I was like, hey, if I'm going to do something, I need to actually go all in on the thing. And that's where True Local came around. It was this idea that I knew a lot about the industry because I was literally just doing door-to-door meat sales. And we just saw an area to improve. E-commerce was taken off. It had been taken off for a while. Yeah. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel. Direct to consumer, back then it was called B2C, and moved over to D2C. There was already a blueprint. People were doing it. The meal kits were taking off. And we figured, let's do the same thing. We'll take that and bring it into a niche market and focus exclusively on proteins. And then, year 1 was hell, year 2 was hell, year 3 was hell. Year 4, we started resembling a business. So year 1, we did like $1 million. Year 2, we did $4 million. I want to say year 3, we did $8 million. Then we did 15 and then ended on 20.
Nice.
And the pain never stopped until probably like the consistent nonstop in the trenches every day. You feel like you're going to die. Probably didn't end until year 3. Then it became more like monthly pain. Like overall, you're kind of like, okay, we have a company and, you know, we probably had 40 employees at the time, but then like maybe once a month you get like an existential crisis, but it wasn't like every day.
Is this a pain on a personal level or on a company level?
Well, both, because the pain on the company level directly falls onto the founder.
Yeah.
So I would say like the issue was just that, okay, so a couple things. So like in year one, usually what's going to happen for founders is that you start to second guess your decision to start a company.
Right.
Because just the way the universe works, you make the decision, you go all in, you're excited for about a month, and then things aren't moving as fast as you expect them to, as it does with everybody.
Right.
And then you start to be like, oh my God, was this a good idea? And then what starts to happen is that you start to get these ridiculous opportunities. It's just the way the world works. Like for whatever reason, now you're starting to, you know, maybe get a job offer somewhere, or maybe you have an opportunity to travel somewhere. Your friend's like, let's just take a year off and go do whatever. So now that you've committed to this thing, now the universe starts to be like, haha, let's try to tempt you with things. Then what ends up happening is, once again, like you start seeing all of your friends doing better because their lives are continuing to move forward, right? Like they didn't decide to give it all up and start from scratch and take on all this risk. They're usually in careers or they're doing whatever. So not only are you having all of this temptation to be like, man, why did you do this? You're watching everybody else's life move forward. So you go through that pain for a while. And once again, you don't know what you don't know. So really, you're probably spending 6 months just figuring out how to even run this business that you've created. Then once you get past that, if you survive that, you're now starting getting into the pain of, you know, really just like, how do you manage a team and grow a culture? And that's, you know, its own whole challenge, and it can be very difficult. And it's not so much about, I talk about it in the book, but a lot of founders struggle with transitioning as founders. So as your company is growing, as your team is growing, you also need to grow. But there's a whole bunch of different reasons as to why founders kind of get stuck in a certain stage. And that doesn't work because, once again, if your team is growing and your company is growing, you got to grow with it. So there's that. And that's I would say in that first year, it's kind of like that personal pain. You're just like, you know, you're insecure about what you're doing. You're unsure. The second year, you start to get into the company pain, where now you've gotten past that point. You have a company, but now the company's struggling. You know, you've got competitors popping up, or you've got, you know, challenges financially, or running out of money, or whatever it is. So the company pain, you know, starts to lay on you. And, you know, it's just, there's so many things that happen when you're starting a company, especially if you're a first timer. You know, what's it like to deal with your first lawsuits? You know, what's it like to deal with your first competitors? What's it like to deal with the first time when your employees go to start a competing business? What's the first time, you know, when you can't, you know, pay your suppliers? Like all these different things that pop up that, you know, at the time are pretty existential. So you go through it, you find ways through it. You know, I think anybody who's had success in business can tell you it's just a game of attrition. Like, who can last longer? Most businesses aren't killed by other companies. They're killed by themselves internally. Founders give up, or they make bad decisions, or, you know, just all these different types of things. So those first 3 years are really painful because, once again, it feels like you're taking, you know, 3 steps forward, 4 steps back.
Yeah.
That's not the case, though. You're actually taking more like 5 steps forward, 4 steps back. But it feels the other way around. It feels like you're going backwards more than you're going forwards. But if you, once you've you have the ability to take a step back and look at it, you are always moving forward. So it was just this crazy time. Fortunately, I think the things that were really lucky with True Local was that we had an amazing, honestly, I know everybody says this, but we had the best team. Like, we really did. And I think it's because we never raised any venture capital. We didn't raise any VC money. So we grew the team organically. Like, we never went through this crazy hiring spree where we would hire 20 people in a month. And what that ended up allowing us to do is, like, let's say we were hiring 1 or 2 people every month. People that we hired had to assimilate to the culture that we had, because, you know, the first 10 employees were literally friends. Like, they were friends or friends of friends. So, like, we were a pretty tight knit group, and none of us actually had any skills. Like, nobody came in being like, oh yeah, I've grown an e-commerce company before, or I'm an expert in the meat space. It was literally just a bunch of us who were like, yo, let's just make this happen. So we were all just really good at problem solving. But as we started growing and actually, you know, recruiting people, we never had this influx of a bunch of new people that could have an impact on the culture of the company. Instead, it was this slow sort of, we're bringing in the right people at the right time that assimilate into the culture of the company. So that was a great thing. And then the other thing too is that, like, because we did it that way, honestly, like, our customers and community rallied around us so hard. Like, I think we were so fortunate because we made so many mistakes along the way, and our customers were so forgiving. And I think it's just because, like, a lot of the time we were really transparent with them. Like, you know, myself and my co-founder were really vocal in the business. You know, we made sure to be out there. Our consumer experience team were absolute rock stars in terms of just building relationships with every single customer we had. And that's a whole other story as to why we could do that, just with the price point of our product and whatnot. But I think that allowed us a little bit more leeway when we would make mistakes, so that customers wouldn't freak out right away and be like, well, we're gone. It's because, sure, maybe there's another product out there that's $10 a month cheaper, but no, you know what? These guys have good service, good quality, and I support them as part of a community. So it's just all these things that you learn going through the business side. But yeah, it was about 3 years till the pain, like the daily sort of, I don't know if we're going to make it, stopped. And it started becoming more like monthly fires that needed to get put out.
Yeah.
And then, the last sprint till the end where the company was sold was like a 10-month process. And that was like the boss battle at the end of it.
That's kind of like the master hand in Smash
Still
Bros.
Smash Bros. Yeah, man, yeah.
That's cool, man. So, I mean, you did solve a pretty unique problem with the service you offered. Like you connected, I guess, suppliers of meat to people directly to people's doors. And I mean, the success of the company is reflective of the fact that was a gap and you filled it. But I want to, so do you consider anyone who starts anything business related, would they be a founder, big or small, or is there a threshold where it's just like, because for me, for example, I do video production. I have a small company. We're a team of like 2 core people, and then we have like 5 more other like subcontractors that we work with. But would you consider that a founder situation, or is it different depending on the nature of the service?
Yeah, like here's how I would describe it. Like first of all, in the book, I talk about how it's exclusively for first-time founders. Now, the way I describe a first-time founder is anybody who hasn't had their big win yet. Okay. Like if whatever your definition of making it is, you're a first-time founder until you've made it to that point. So for me, as an example, when I was in year 4 of True Local and we were doing 15 million bucks, I considered it a first-time founder. You're like a first-time founder in the trenches, still figuring it out, still going. But to me, that is, there is still the idea of a first-time founder thinking about starting their first company. So it's all the same until you get that win. Like it's all the same until you get that first trophy, in my opinion. Once you get that first trophy, well, now it's a different thing. You have the experience and the experience is now validated, right? So that's how I describe a first-time founder. But to be honest, what I really prefer is, I think you can just categorize people. I don't know what the word is, founder, entrepreneur, or whatever. I think that the way it is there are people who start businesses where really they are imagining that they are going to do a lot of the work. It's a service, and it's something that they might, bring on a couple people here and there to support the service or product that they are doing. And I look at those kind of like as the solopreneurs or whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean? Like you see it a lot with like, what's examples? Yeah, like content creators.
It's a lot in our industry. There's a lot of people that you just kind of described it, where they offer a service and they have people that come on here and there to support it. So
for sure. And then you look at it a lot with online coaches and things like that.
Yeah.
But then there's another one, and it's the people who are looking to do a service or a product at scale, in which requires the systems and the process and the infrastructure, so that it doesn't matter who the head of this business is, the business is still working. There's a full team of employees that are looking to bring this to life. And, I think that is the distinction that I make, is people that are, doing it where it's like, look, this is a thing for me that I'm going to go do, and I'm going to have some people that are going to support me in the thing that I'm doing, versus I'm trying to build an entity that lives and breathes on its own and provides the value in the world at the highest possible level, as long as the financials make sense and it's profitable, And once again, I say that most companies, most of these larger companies that we're probably describing here are not profitable, but they all have the goal to get to profitability. So that's what I mean when I say profitable. So that's another way you could look at it. And then the final way I look at it is, not so much what's the difference between what's an entrepreneur or a founder, or what do I describe it as, but there are different types of businesses. So like for me, I look at it as there's 3 different types of businesses. And the number one is kind of like your lifestyle business. And the lifestyle business, is the type of person who is like, I don't have this idea of building this massive workforce or anything. I want to find and make a living doing something I enjoy. And I don't need to take on any money, because I'm going to grow this business organically with the profits that I make. And that, so there's that type of business. Then you've got the second type of business, which is kind of like your venture-backed businesses, which are kind of like your growth at all cost businesses. And these are the businesses where the whole MO really is to sprint to growth as fast as possible to try to get, arguably an early acquisition or an early IPO. So what ends up happening is you raise a ton of money so that you can funnel that directly into the business so that you can grow faster with the hopes that along the way, you'll figure out a way to scale it to profitability. So there's that type of business. And then the final type of business is this like legacy style business where it's, usually like this kind of like deep R&D. It's a passion that requires a lot of R&D, or it's something you have no intention on selling, but you try to have like a global impact. And it's, you look at Elon as an example of trying to build these legacy style companies. And neither one is better or worse than the other. It's just that they're very different types of businesses. And the reason that I talk about it this way is because people always ask me, well, how much should I spend on marketing, or should I go and raise money? And I'm like, that's not the right question, because in business, there's no right or wrong way to run a business. There's only different strategies and tools that you can use. And the good founders or entrepreneurs or business people understand what type of business they have and what type of strategy or tools make the most sense for their business. So essentially all strategies and tools are effective.
Right.
It's just how and when you use them. So for example, if somebody's asking me if I should raise money, if I've got two founders and one tells me that, they don't really want to risk a whole lot, they're not trying to make millions, they just want to maybe make like 6 figures and doing something they enjoy. Well, why would you go raise money? Now you're just going to have someone that you're beholden to, and you're not even going to use that money to grow the business because you want to grow it organically, versus somebody on the other side who's like, what? No, I just want to try to grow it as fast as I can. Well, then why would I tell you not to raise money if your goal is to grow as fast as you can? The money's going to help you. So to me, step one for anybody looking to get into business is decide what type of business you want to get into. And I love asking people that, because some people either just immediately know, but I find it interesting, the people who are confused about which one they are. It's like, I don't think it's confusing. Like, I think you just got to be honest with yourself. I think a lot of people sometimes don't want to admit that they're, well, I'm on the lifestyle side, or maybe I'm in the venture side. And it's just like, you got to know that, because the decisions that you're going to make are going to make or break the business, in the sense that if you make decisions that are successful for a venture-backed company, but you're running a lifestyle business, it will cripple your lifestyle business, and vice versa. If you use the strategies that are effective for a lifestyle business in a venture-backed company, you're going to cripple that one too.
Interesting. It's an interesting framework, like the whole lifestyle, venture, legacy, like kind of dividing it into three. And I think it all kind of ties back to self-awareness and being honest with yourself. Like, what do you want to do with the business or what you've created? And you're making me now reflect on what I want to do with my business and stuff. So I appreciate that. I'm sure a lot of people are going to appreciate that insight. But Marc, I wanted to kind of ask you something a little bit separate from business, but maybe ties to it. But what does creativity mean to you?
Yeah, it's funny. So I was actually just thinking about this a lot lately. So a bit of a long story. So when I was a kid, I always really wanted to draw. I really wanted to draw, but I think it was tied to a lot of the games. Like I was gaming all the time, right? So once again, when you're not really a social kid and your whole life revolves around video games, and for me, it was like Final Fantasy and like a lot of these RPGs, like these very heavy, story-based, character-based games. Well, of course, then like what's the ultimate superpower? To me, it was like, if I could draw, then I could create my own little worlds and stories using these characters, like the worst thing about these old games on, PS2 and whatever is that you're stuck with the storyline that you got. So it'd be so sick to just be able to like draw up characters fighting each other or whatever it was. So I had this like deep desire to learn how to draw, and I just sucked at it. Like I was so bad, and I tried so hard. Like I would get the books, I would try to draw anime characters, I would try to draw all these things, and I'm just horrible. Like, and it was one of those things too where I really, really did try. Like it wasn't for a lack of effort, that just sucked. So anyway, I always thought creativity was interesting because I never could do the thing. And that's hilarious, because moving forward a few years, I think that like, I like to consider myself a jack of all trades. I'm non-technical. I'm not going to be the best salesperson. I'm not going to be the best. I'm not the best at anything, but I can do a lot of things fairly well. I think I do a good job of bringing a team together that we can then go and execute on strategies and kind of play the chessboard that way. But I do have a really good eye. And I think that that's something that, when you look at True Local or Tell or Dash Task, or even now with Debate, I've always done the brands have always been the vision that I had for it very, very strongly. Any of the designs that we do with anything, I'm very, very hands-on it. But the joke is I can't do it myself. Like I cannot use Photoshop. I don't use Adobe. I don't do this type of stuff. So I have to build a really strong relationship with the design team because I already know what I want. And I think there's a lot of people out there who work with designers or work with design teams and want them to bring it to life. And that's a luxury for sure to have that. But I think I'm one of those micromanagers when it comes to the designing side because I already know what I want. So like who here can help bring it to life with minor tweaks and opinions and whatnot. So
that's cool.
Well, it's cool in a certain way. But then in the other way, it's like I struggle a lot to express myself because I can't do this stuff myself. You know, I can't go and just draw or create. I like to think I'm a fairly good writer, but I don't write that often. You know, music, same thing. You know, of course, who you know, what kid hasn't just tried to like, who hasn't written bars? Like I think someone's lying, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm a pretty decent writer, but then same thing, I can't sing. I can't sing, I can't rap, I can't do any of that. So I'm like, I have all these things. Like I like to think I think fairly deeply, but I struggle a lot to express myself because I just don't have the skills to do it. Now I've reconciled that in the sense that I think business is how I express myself.
Right.
I think the industries that I go into, I think the way that my brands look, I think the people that I hire, I think the strategies that we take, I think the way that we approach investors, the way that we do interviews, the way that we do our marketing is kind of an expression of my creativity. And, you know, it's a way for me to take part of who I am and infuse it into the things that I'm doing. But it's funny because just now I just turned 33 like 2 weeks ago. And I started really thinking about, okay, well, how do I want to improve, you know, this year? I'm 33, going to 34, what's next? And the number one thing was that I want to be able to express myself better. And especially now with True Local being done and all this, I'm like, I have so much to share and so much that I want to say and so much that I believe in deeply, but I don't do a good enough job of putting that stuff out there. And that was something where I was like, this year, I really want to try to find a way to express myself more. And I don't necessarily know what that way is because once again, it's not going to be through art because I can't draw. It's not going to be through music because I can't do that, even though that would be like the ideal. I would love to be able to take what I feel or what I think or however and put it into like beautiful music. That would be awesome. Never going to happen. But I do see it. I can do it through my businesses, but I think this year I need to get better. I need to do a lot more writing, like long form writing. So not like trying to find like clickbait or whatever works. Like I just want to just take the ideas that I have and write them out. And if anybody resonates with them, perfect. But that's kind of how I look at creativity. So I like to think I'm a creative guy, but I have to work through people to bring that creativity to life. So it's it's an interesting relationship for sure.
Yeah, that's a deep definition, and you have an interesting level of like self-awareness where and also like your ability to kind of set a goal and go for it, I think is why you've gotten to where you are. So it's inspiring. So creativity, it is one of those weird, what's cool about business is it has so many potential outlets, and you can express it through like your communication, through your even the boring parts of it. And one of my biggest struggles in business is the communicating my ideas, because you know, you acknowledge that, okay, I can't do everything. So the hard part is to kind of communicate that in the most effective way. And how have you found ways to better communicate what you're thinking? Because I find I'm one of those people who are like, I know I can do everything myself, but that's not good. That doesn't serve me any good in the big picture. So how have you found ways to kind of communicate better with the people to achieve a goal that you have?
Well, I think that like just inherently the one skill that I do have to be proficient in, and I don't have a choice, is communication. Because like if I'm going to be a jack of all trades, you know, CEO, founder, the one thing that I have to do, seeing as I can't do everybody's job better than they can, they're all significantly better than me in their own rights. I need to be able to communicate the vision to make sure that they know what to do, they know where they're going, and then I have to be able to make sure to clearly articulate to all the different departments in the ways in which they can work with one another, and you know, the challenges that we're going to face to kind of set expectations. And of course there's the diffusing of issues, right? 60 people, and you're going through crazy times like BLM and COVID and vaccines and all this type of stuff. Like you're dealing with HR stuff on a regular basis, right? So it's like, if you can't communicate, that's the default. I think there's a lot of people who could be great leaders without having, you know, the typical sort of leadership traits. But the one thing you got to be able to communicate. And I think for me, I think I'm a pretty good communicator. Now, the challenging part comes when you don't necessarily know exactly where you're going. You have an idea. You see a very blurry star off in the distance, but you see the star, it's there, but it's blurry as hell.
Yeah.
And you know that you got to go towards that star, but it's very difficult to, and sometimes the star is clear, sometimes it's more blurry. And that's usually just based on as you're trying and testing things and feedback from the market. You know, if you start getting a series of wins, then that star becomes much clearer and it's easier to go towards it and it's easier to articulate it to the team. But when the things you're trying aren't working, or maybe there's more data that has, you've read something new or you found a new piece of data that is making it so you got to kind of change directions a little bit, it becomes very difficult to articulate to a team what to do next. Now, I think as founders or entrepreneurs or whatever the term is, leaders, let's say, it's okay to walk towards a blurry star. We know that the star is not always going to be clear, but for the most part, team members or employees don't feel that way. A lot of the time, there's a reason that they're team members or employees, right? If they were cool with risk and uncertainty, they'd probably go start their own companies. A lot of the time, and even on the high spectrum of risk takers, in the employee sphere, they go work for startups. So they're used to the uncertainty and whatever, but they still need to have something like a leader that is being like, don't worry, we got this kind of thing covered. So being able to articulate when things are good is one thing. It's something you need. Being able to communicate and articulate when you have to diffuse situations, you've got big personalities, big salaries, big egos. You've got to be able to understand who you're dealing with and then understand how to have that conversation, because the way you deal with one person is going to be very different than the way you deal with somebody else. And, people always talk about how, oh, well, that's not fair and this and that. Look, business ain't fair. And anybody who's trying to run a fair business with a team, you're actually doing a disservice to the people who are disproportionately carrying the weight. So for me, it's very much like people are treated based on the productivity that they're bringing to the business. And there's a lot of different ways and a lot of different ways you can rank that. But you have to understand that everybody needs to be treated differently and you have to be able to speak that language. So doing all that's important, but then doing all that while you might not actually know what to do next.
Yeah. It's kind of terrifying, honestly.
Yeah. I like it.
I guess, so for you, maybe it's a motivator. Like it is kind of scary. And on a personal kind of individual level, as like Marc Lafleur, the human, what are some things that you do to kind of help you bear the weight of all of this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I just, well, first of all, I guess the easiest default. So my wife is my best friend, you know what I mean? And she's worked in all the businesses since True Local. So I think, that's something that I very often take for granted, in the sense that when I come home and I'm having a bad day, she automatically understands, because she knows the context. She probably was part of a meeting where something horrible happened and she understands that, okay, like this is what's going on. Yeah. So I think that like just knowing that I have the freedom to be, upset at home, or I have the freedom to have a day where like my wife and, my partner is going to understand that, okay, like this is a hard time. I think it completely removes this other level of stress that other people face when their partners aren't supportive. So not only are you getting kicked in the face in your business, but then you got to come home and your partner doesn't understand, or your partner is like, well, you promised you were going to do these things and I need you to do them. And it's like, listen, like, I just lost $300,000 in funding or whatever it is. And it's like, okay, well, it doesn't matter. You said you were going to do this thing for the family, and I get it. You got to be there for the family, but that's it's such a difficult situation to be in, right? And that trying to balance that, I can only imagine how much extra stress that adds. So I think that like when you're just dealing with business stress, I think that anybody can bear that. I think that, that's just a kind of strength, willpower, determination, conviction, grit, whatever you want to call it. But I think people start to break when they got to carry that load, but then also carry a load of stress socially and at home. So I think that when you start taking both of those is where people kind of break. So I think I'm very fortunate to not have to deal with that second type of stress. I think the next thing really is that like I come from the world where like there was no choice. Right. Like we were broke, you know what I mean? And if True Local went under, I was going to go bankrupt. I was living off credit cards. You just can't, what do you have a breakdown? How is that going to get you through next week? And I get it. Trust me. I've been in dark places, like very, very dark places, but the way that I always kind of got through it was just that, like, I don't have a choice. Like I can sit here as much as I want, and I do, and I'm going to be mopey, and I'm going to be, down on myself. But eventually that passes, and eventually you realize, okay, like you got to keep on going, or just give up.
Yeah.
But I know for some people, maybe that like, yeah, it's okay, just give up. But like for me, that was like never really an option. And people always say that. You see it like every inspirational Instagram post is like, just never give up and whatever. And it's so easy to say that shit. Like when you're in the moment and you're like really struggling. I wrote about it in the book actually. And ironically, this whole thing kind of talking about it in these early years, like I'll never forget, like I would say like, God, for months, if not a year straight, like every day I would wake up. And the second I woke up, like, when you like realize you're awake or alive or whatever it is, like whether you come out of a dream or you just like, oh, like, okay, like you don't open your eyes, but you're like, I'm awake.
Yeah.
Immediately, like I would just get this like shot down my spine of just like cortisol, just like the stress, like just like that, that sharp, shitty, it's not adrenaline, but it's just like that, like all of the horrible things that are happening. And you get that sometimes when like something scary is happening. Like if you got to slam, like slam your brakes in the car or something goes wrong.
Right.
And it's here and there. It's actually torture when that happens every day just by realizing that you're alive.
Wow.
And like, that's kind of how it felt for like a long time. And once again, I try to tell people, I'm like, trust me, I know what you're feeling, but like, I always just looked at it like, I don't know another way to do. Like, there's just no other option. It's either get through this or give up. And that was kind of where it's at. So I don't know if that's actually helpful advice. I don't recommend it at all. If it's possible to avoid ever being in those scenarios, I would highly recommend that. But totally, I think that the nature of starting a business at 25 with no experience, and the nature of starting a business that requires logistics, you're dealing with food, you're dealing with, regulatory bodies, you're dealing with competitors, you're dealing with, big dollars. Like we were spending $200,000 a month on marketing, you're dealing with employees with no experience, none of this stuff. I think inherently you're asking for a lot of pain, and you're asking for a lot of problem solving. You're asking for a lot of risk. So the one thing that I always say is that try to avoid those feelings at all cost, but always be blessed in knowing that like this is self-inflicted. Like nobody forced you to go be a founder. So when it's
a good reminder.
You know what I'm saying? So it's not like if people had to experience this and it was, put on them, like they didn't get, they were like, oh, you just, I'm assigning you this burden.
Right.
That's really scary. But at the end of the day, no matter how painful it gets, like you chose this, you chose to reach for the stars. You chose to go after a life that you feel you deserve, a life that you want to live. You feel like you're destined for more. Well, we're so blessed and fortunate to have the ability to choose to struggle for 5 years to go chase this life that you want. So that's kind of the way I rationalize it.
I feel like you have a very high capacity for that. I mean, it's a testament to like when success is the only option, that is kind of what happens. But it's obviously in other situations where there are many other options. I feel like it's not as motivating to just keep going. It's like I could just go do something else, But now that you've kind of gotten through all that and you've matured and learned all this stuff, what are some things you do that just kind of keep you energized, keep you kind of centered with yourself? And I know recently I've been seeing you run a marathon or two, and you're doing some pretty intensive physical training. Is there anything related to that kind of stuff that ties back to the energy that you have going into all this?
Yeah, like I think, like I'm a huge believer that you're different versions of yourself throughout life. Like you live many different lives. Okay. Now, you never change as a person. Like I truly believe that people don't change. However, like deep down inside.
Yeah.
However, the person you need to be to get through different situations does change.
Okay.
And I feel as though that those are just different versions of yourself that are forced to be brought forward to deal with the current circumstances. So for example, in university, I was super social, like loved it. And I was out there because the reward system and the things that mattered to me, incentivized being social. I wanted to be liked and I wanted to have friends. And so for me, it was like, let's go out, let's have a good time, do it for the story, right? I remember like that was what it was all about. Like you have to live life for the story. Everything's for the story. And that couldn't be any more different than who I had to become to make True Local successful. And True Local was just robotic. It was like routine. Do not miss a minute because this is so long and you have to just get into a groove and you have to be the best version of yourself. And I don't care about anything socially. I don't care what anybody thinks about me. I just need to go ahead and win and get after this. And it was very robotic. complete contrast to that person that I was in university, who's also a complete contrast to that, you know, insecure kid that I was when I just lived through my video games. However, that's still Marc Lafleur. It's just my environment forced a different version of me to come forward to deal with what I was dealing with. So, you know, the thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately is, you said it yourself. It's kind of like, when the only option is success, you have a high threshold for pain. I have no interest in ever going back to that. And I think that I did it. I went through it. I know that I can do it if I have to. I do not want to go back to that. I think that the reason that people have to do things the hard way at first is because if you got no reputation, no credibility, and no resources, that's typically what most first-time founders are. Like, you're starting off from scratch. Once you have made it, though, you wouldn't play the game the same way again, having all that. So for me, I'm very proud that I was able to be that person during that time.
Yeah.
I know that deep down, if I ever to go back and knock on the door of that Marc Lafleur from 2015 to 2020, he's there and he'll reluctantly get out of bed and be like, all right, like, stand aside, we'll take care of this kind of thing. The same way that, like, you know, if I have to go and, you know, shake hands and kiss babies and be the life of whatever, or just be on, I can go tap on that bed, the door of, you know, University Marc, and be like, hey, come on out, come and do this. Right. So, it's funny. And the reason I'm saying all this is because the way I kind of look at coping with things, or how do I do whatever, is that after True Local sold, this whole new set of problems kind of arose. And that's the thing, right? Like, life never gets easier. Life never gets, there's always something. There's always something in your life. And that's why you see celebrities where people look at their lives and think that because they have all this money that their life is perfect, but they're, you know, these have these ridiculous mental disorders. And what I realized was that I've always been financially motivated. And I love talking about that because it's 2023 and it's like so taboo to say that you like money.
It is. It's like, it is a little taboo. Yeah.
Like, you're like you're this horrible person who's, you know, trying to drown all the seals, and, you know, you don't care about anybody else if you're chasing money. And that to me is ridiculous. And I think that we need to go back to the days where people took pride in working hard to earn a better life. Like, that's really where we got to go back to. So anyway, I was always financially motivated. So I hated hearing people say that, you know, oh, money isn't everything. Like, money isn't everything. Like, man, I just said this the other day. I'm like, that's nice for you to say in your little, you know, whatever car you're driving. But like, when you're trying to figure out between paying rent and, you know, getting a new shirt for an interview that you have to do, yeah, money is everything. So my thing has always been like, you cannot forget about the money until you make the money. You have to make the money first, and then you'll realize that money isn't everything. Everybody knows deep down that money isn't everything, but you got to earn that money first to then be able to sit with that and make that decision. So for me, you know, that's kind of where I got to with when True Local sold. I knew that, you know, money is not the answer to all problems in any way, shape, or form. But for me, it's a meter stick, and I enjoy chasing things. I'm the best version of myself when I'm chasing something. So where I'm going with this is that the thing that I started struggling with after True Local sold was True Local was my purpose. It was the only thing in my life that I cared about and that mattered. That was it. It was very, like, the focus was razor sharp.
Right.
When True Local ended, I now had the ability to do anything. Like, I could work on any project I want. I could work with whoever I want, and I could do whatever I want. I could do all the fun things. I could do all the hard things. I could move. I could travel. I could take up anything that I wanted. I could write a book. I could, you know, I could do whatever I want to do. Race cars, exactly. And I started doing everything.
Right.
Because very much, like, I never had opportunities or options before. So now it was, this makes me happy. This makes me happy. And what I realized was that I was doing everything half-assed. As this is the day old tale, you're doing too much. So instead of doing one thing at 110%, I was doing like 5 things at like 60%. And at the time I didn't notice it, but I started just realizing, like, this doesn't make sense. Like, I'm doing so much stuff. Like, it really, and I'm not even enjoying it. And I'll never forget, it was this past May when it really hit me hard. And it was, I forget what they all were, but I did my first pro race, the Toronto Indy race. I think that was a race at a Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, but I did that race. I ran my first marathon. I climbed Mount Rainier, and I think we were moving from my hometown back to Kitchener, like weekend after weekend after weekend. Wow. And each and every single one of those things are like life defining. Like, for a lot of people, it's like, yo, you're racing your first pro race. That's like the best moment of your life.
You were in the AMG at that point?
I was in the AMG, yeah. I was doing, so the Mercedes, the AMG GT4, that would have been my first, it was sick. Yeah. That was my first time being in that car. So it's a GT4 car. So that's like a life-changing milestone moment. Climbing Mount Rainier. I love hiking.
Where's Mount Rainier again?
It's out in Washington, so in the US. 14,000 feet, camped overnight at 10,000 feet, biggest mountain I've ever done. I love hiking. Like that's a bucket list hike.
Nice.
And then, ran my first marathon. And it was like, I remember realizing, and it hit me like a rock where I was like, I'm not enjoying any of these things. I enjoyed them in the moment, but I wasn't like looking forward to them the way they should. Like the magnitude of what they were, I wasn't actually taking it in because I was like, okay, I got to do the race, then I got to go climb the mountain, I got to do the run. And I was just like thinking through all of it. I'm like, I'm not even living through this. Like this isn't even, it's not fun right now.
Was it you like the idea of them more than what went into it? Or
no,
was it just that you were doing all of them at the same time?
It was just all at the same time.
Okay.
And what ended up happening was because I was, when True Local was when it got acquired, I was on a contract to oversee the transition to the new CEO for 2 years. Mm-hmm. The new CEO was our old COO. Okay. So there wasn't that much for me to do. The parent company had their own idea of where they wanted to take the business. So they were running with that. I was just kind of making sure to like, try to make sure that everything was staying pretty. So I was so bored. So of course it was easy to say yes to everything. And because like my schedule, I'm usually booking like a few months out. Mm-hmm. It just so happened that May, like I'd said yes to climb Mount Rainier a quarter before.
Right.
I knew I was doing the race a while before, all these things happened before. And I'm like, yeah, we'll deal with it when we get there. And then May came and all these things were things I was really looking forward to. And in the moment they were great. They really were. But once again, like my first pro race, that's something I want to be dreaming about for a month in advance. Like I want to be thinking, that's something I want to think about every single day until that comes. Mount Rainier, same thing. I want to be like, that's what I'm counting down for. You know what I mean? Like, and it just wasn't happening that way. So it really hit me like a rock where it's like, wow, there is a curse in being able to do anything. And what I need to do is I need to become a better person and become more disciplined and decide that what I care more about, more than doing everything, is doing the things that I'm doing at 110%. I know what I'm capable of when I'm at 110%. That race season that I did with CISC, that was 110% focused on racing, and we won that championship. Yeah. When I was doing True Local, it was 110% focused on True Local, and we got acquired. And I even made a post where I was like, confidence is knowing that I'll succeed at anything that I give 100% of myself to, but I'll fail at everything that I give 99% of myself to. So I started kind of taking stuff like that, and then this idea of what do you do when you can do anything, and this kind of experience of doing all these amazing things and not loving them the way that I should have. And it really became that I need to now only do things that I'm going to do at 110%. And that made that kind of answer a lot easier. Like, what do you do when you can do anything? Right. Do the things that you're going to do 100%, and anything else, just say no to it. And once again, I know there are probably a lot of people who learn this lesson in different ways, but for me, it had to be struggle your ass off, get everything you've ever wanted, realize that there's more, and then now how do you kind of discipline yourself? Like it's like a kid for the first time in a candy shop, right? Yeah. Like we had no money, now I got money. Now I can do anything I want. But there are, issues that come with that. So essentially, that's where this whole running thing came in. So it just so happened that racing season's done right now. And I'm not going to go to the US this year to race. So I'll take a step back. So the original question was, how am I kind of, coping and looking at these things? So for me, True Local was 110% of everything, no fun on the side at all. I don't think I have to go back to that stage again of my life to run a successful business that can have a big impact. I think that with the resources I have, I'm obviously able to fund my own business. Right. I'm able to work with the people that I want to work with who are highly skilled and talented. We have more resources, more tools, and better knowledge at our disposal. So I don't think we have to go back to that. And I actually think that I do work better when I do have something that makes me happy on the side as well. So I started realizing that, okay, I've got business, which is going to be 80% of my life. And then I got 20% that I can do things I enjoy. So either one thing at 20 or 10%, whatever you want to look at. And those things I can all give 100% towards, but I can only do 3 max. So once again, business being the main focus.
Are you still racing?
Yeah, so racing. So I was going to say, racing is one of them.
Nice.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So I'm loving that. And then the running thing came up because racing season's over, and I'm like trying to figure out and plan what's going to happen for next year. And I just was like, man, I need something to like go in on. Like I just got to do. It makes me happy. So I started looking at it from the perspective of trying to take this life lesson that I had of what do you do when you do anything? I'm only gonna do things at 100%. And I started looking at my entire life and what I was doing. And what was happening was that I always like to work out. So I played football in university. I did CrossFit, not competitively. I did boxing, not competitively. Like I've always kind of been fairly fit to the point where I was always working out twice a day. So I would always do like an hour of cardio in the morning. So whether I was on the bike or whether I was, you know, it was usually with boxing was another big thing. And I'm usually doing weights in the afternoon.
Nice.
But the problem was that I was always half-assing it. Like I was just going through the motions. Like I'd go and just do whatever and just kind of be like, get it over with. And then in the gym, I was just like, you know, I'm on my phone. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a structure. Right. And what I started realizing was that this is so stupid. Like most people, when it comes to fitness, they struggle with carving out the time. They struggle with the commitment. They struggle with the discipline. Those are things that I have, you know, that's kind of one of my competitive advantages is that I have that. And I've already carved out these time slots. Me not going into these time slots, treating it like 100% is a waste of time. So I was like, well, what if I just were to now actually turn these workout sessions into training sessions? Like I'm training for something. So then I was like, okay, sweet. Like what am I going to train for? I'm not going to start fighting in boxing. So I'm not going to take that to the next level. CrossFit's not for me. Like I love CrossFit, but I'll never be able to compete in CrossFit. So I was like, what can I do? And then, you know, just this running bug kind of like started crawling into my head. I always was doing, I'm not a runner, but I would do the David Goggins 4x4x48 every year. So I've done it for 3 years.
Is it like a workout program?
No, it's like you pretty much run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah. So it's essentially 6.6 kilometers every 4 hours for like 2 days. And we just did it as like a, you know, I always like to say with running, people are like, wow, like you're really training for your fitness. I'm like, no, like running's training your mind more than anything. So
yeah, I can relate. I got into running at the age of 25. I'm 27 now, but it was one of those things where when I first started, I couldn't run a kilometer. And then I think last year I ran, my longest run so far is like 7 kilometers, which is, you ran a marathon. I know that's like not even, I mean, it's a fraction of what you've ran, but it is a huge mental game and it's one that I'm still learning.
The thing that I love about running though is that like pain is pain. So like if somebody's 50K is just as painful as someone's 7K, then it doesn't matter, right? And that's the truth. I know, like I remember where I started too. Like I know people that if you ask them to run 5K, it is gonna be more painful than somebody running a marathon. Now, does the distance take away from the impact that workout has on your body? Absolutely not. It's equally as impressive in my opinion. And I like running because it scales that way. So like you can have your own like exertion of a marathon, but for you with where you're at on your journey, it's like running a marathon. So I love that more than anything. I love taking people that I've never ran and force them to run 5K. And it's like, I truly believe when it comes to running, I think anybody can do it. Anybody. It's just how much pain can you suffer through in this particular moment. So I love that one as like running's a mental game in my opinion. Now, of course, like look, like I'm not giving any training advice. So we'll start with that. But yeah, no, I like the running for the mental side of it. But that was the thing that started letting me take my workouts seriously. I had the time blocks, you know, blocked off, but now I was like, okay, well running, man, you can go real high in running. Like you can do marathons, you can do ultras, you can race marathons, you can do like, there's a lot of cool that you can kind of keep on going with it. So, you know, it was literally like 2 months ago. And I just like obsessed over it. You know, Andrew Huberman, you know, I found his podcast and he, you know, my degree's in health, right? So I always say I've never done anything with it. But the thing I like about having a degree in health is that I can pick up what they're putting down. Like I understand the terminology. I know, you know, I know that world. So with Andrew Huberman, I was able to kind of get like a really good understanding of, you know, how to put a program together. He has this amazing series with him and a guy named Andy Galpin, who's this amazing muscle guy and just one of the best podcast series I've ever heard. They have 6 parts. They're each like 2 hours. And I pretty much just like put that on repeat for a long time and then started writing out my own programming on how I wanted to structure my training. And then, you know, just YouTube videos. That's the most beautiful thing is like, I think I have a pretty comprehensive training program and I've done all of it just from resources online, right?
Free resources too, right?
Exactly. And then when I started taking it seriously, I was able to get the University of Waterloo involved because they have like literally state-of-the-art fitness equipment in terms of metabolic testing. They've got all the motion biomechanic cameras set up. They've got the VO2 test machines. They got the DEXA scans. They got everything. So, you know, it's funny, full circle. Once again, I'm in the same building doing all of this elite performance testing right across from the room where my academic counselor used to always tell me like, oh, you're on academic probation again this month. So it's
You're
been
just
trippy.
looking at that room while you're running and you're like, is it motivating you in a way, or are you just thinking about it a little bit?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I absolutely find joy in the fact that academic institutions want to have me come out to talk to students, and professors reach out to me to give lectures. Like, that makes me very, very happy from the ironic perspective.
Do you tell the story, the same story of how you were on academic probation?
Every time.
Interesting.
You know what? I think that, and I've been very, especially with the University of Waterloo, especially with the Faculty of Health, they like, if you're going to ask me to come and do a talk, you're going to get what I have to say. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be my story. And I think that works well, because I think that's why people want to have me come out. But there's definitely people I've been in situations before, like, hey, like, don't say this, don't say that. I'm like, well, look, like, I'm just not the right guy for you. Like, I'm also not going out here being like saying crazy, wild things, but like, I'm definitely going to, I'm going to tell you how, like, I fought with my teachers all the time. Like, I was on detention more times than I can remember. I was on academic probation, and the Faculty of Health, just seems to have embraced it. And it seems to be a great relationship, because I think, because I call it like it is, more students come out. And once again, like, I like to think most students are like me than the prim and proper keynote speaker who comes, who had all of these, like, I think that, like, as a student, you can kind of be like, okay, he's rough around the edges. None of this shit was in his stars. Like, none of it was planned, and he somehow made it. So that's been kind of fortunate. So I definitely enjoy, I love, talking at universities makes me happy, but the thing I love the most is talking in high schools, actually. And I've talked about it a lot. I did the keynote at the Globe and Mail conference, and one of the things I said was to all the founders in the room, like, if you have a chance, go back and talk at your high school, because the academic system is so narrow, especially in high school, that there are probably so many kids sitting in that room that are like insecure because they want to go be YouTubers, or they want to go and pursue a career in like Lego building. I don't know. And whether it's their parents, or whether it's the teachers, or whether it's the school system saying that's not the way to do it. You got to go to university. You got to go to college. You got to get a job. You got to get a pension. They're just being beaten down and like stripped away from any ambition or creativity. And I always say that, look, if you're a founder, you're probably already rough around the edges. It's just the nature of founders. Go to the school, tell people your story. You'll probably inspire at least a handful of kids to look at business. So I know what that would have done for me in high school, because I didn't find entrepreneurship till university, but I didn't know it existed. But I knew that I like to think that if someone had come to my school and just been like, hey, this is who I am, this is how I struggled, I made it out the other side, going completely against the grain, and I did it through business, I would have probably inspired me to get started sooner.
Yeah. You seem to have a very high level of confidence. And is that something you always had, or is it something you developed as you had the achievements, they built it over time?
Yeah. Like, I think I've definitely always been very confident. I don't know. The confidence that I've had has definitely served me well. I think, I think about it a lot, because how do you figure out the borderline between confidence and arrogance? And I've kind of stopped. I know that I'm also arrogant, and I look at it from the perspective of that when you look at individuals, it's like, let's take a random person, someone who was it just recently? We were just talking about, you see the movie Napoleon just came out? This is a good example.
No, I haven't seen that.
So the movie Napoleon just came out, and Napoleon is like this great wartime general, won all these battles. But there's a moment in the movie where, this is probably a spoiler, so maybe I won't say too much. Long story short, he goes through, he wins all these battles, and then eventually he has the decision to make. And he decides to keep pursuing. It makes no sense. It's irrational. Everyone's telling him not to do it, but he's this great general. Everybody loves him. France loves him. He's got all the confidence in the world. And then that's kind of when it slips into arrogance, where he decides to make a decision to pursue the enemy, where everybody's like, we're all going to die. Don't do this. It's not good. And he goes and does it anyway and suffers this brutal defeat. And everyone's like, oh my God, how could he do this? How could he do whatever? Why did he do that? He would have been so much better if he wasn't that confident and arrogant. But the truth is, if you didn't have that level of confidence and arrogance, then none of the previous things that he did would have ever happened, because the same person who could win all of these battles and bring your freedom to your country and be your king and do all these things is the exact same mix of character traits that made him make that horrible decision in that moment. So what ends up happening is that people who do great things also have the capability to do really bad things. And when you see any individual traits that are massively positive, they also have an equal negative association with them. And I think you can kind of look at that with confidence and arrogance. Like, there are some very charismatic people in this world who can be incredibly confident and you never sense any of the arrogance, but it's still there. Mm-hmm. It's just, once again, they have this amazing way of articulating and doing what they do. I think that, to me, confidence, the pros outweigh the cons. So I would rather have people index incredibly high on confidence, knowing that there are going to be some horrible character traits that come with that. Mm-hmm. Arrogance, cockiness, all of this stuff. Those things aren't good. I'm not saying they're good, but if that's the necessary evil that comes with being overly confident, then the benefits you're going to get in life by being overly confident are going to be far superior than the mishaps that you're going to make by being cocky and arrogant. So I think that extrapolates to a lot of different things too. It's not just about confidence. So for me, I try to rationalize it a lot. So anyway, where did my whole thing come from? Look, like, back to this whole crock pot, right? It's a lot of different things.
It's really good at, like, kind of metaphor of life, the crock pot.
Yeah. And, so I don't know the one particular thing. I think the easiest thing, if you want to talk about, like, from a nature versus nurture, like, look, I grew up with my mom. My dad was always in the picture, but I grew up with my mom, and my mom always, and I don't know if this was the thing, but I know it's a big part of it, but my mom would always let me do whatever I wanted. And it was like, you can do whatever you want, but you're going to live with the repercussions. I'm going to tell you that, like, if you do this thing, this is what's going to happen. It's going to be bad. But if you want to go do it, but you're going to learn the lesson yourself. And my mom, no matter what, would always support me. Yeah. So, like, no matter what, she always had my back. So once again, like what I was saying before, where I have this beautiful gift where I get to come home to my wife, and I know that I'm never going to have to deal with any shit. If I had a bad day at work and I have to carry some of that negativity home, I know that she understands. We work together, and that's such a gift. Well, I think that another gift that I had was with my mom, where I always knew that there was someone in my corner. I never felt insecure deep down, like deep down. Of course, as a kid, I was overweight. I had glasses. I had an afro. On the outside, I had a lot of insecurities socially, but deep down, I always knew who I was, and I always knew that I was loved at home. And I like to think that probably is where some of this kind of like deep-rooted confidence that I have comes from. And then, of course, there's just the naivety too. There's the flip side where it's just like, I'm probably confident in certain areas because I'm so naive, thinking that, like, I probably walk a lot closer to the cliff than I realize in certain scenarios.
Just blindly optimistic in a way.
Yeah.
It's pretty powerful. I feel silly sometimes when I try to exercise that, like, optimism of, I read a book, The Magic of Thinking Big, and it was all about think big, believe it can happen, and it will happen. And oftentimes I find myself in situations where I just, like, it's hard to think big, but I'm just like, do it. It's going to be great. Everything's going to be fine. And that kind of, like, I feel silly sometimes with how optimistic I'm being, because there's, like, half of me that's, like, struggling to have those thoughts that's saying, no, don't do it. But then there's the other half that's like, just do it. So I don't know if you can relate to that at all, that kind of blind optimism. And
yeah, I think the sweet spot. So okay, so I think the next thing to bring in with, like, confidence, optimism, the third ingredient there is kind of like self-awareness. So, like, if you are blindly optimistic and you deep down know that it can't be true or know that it's not you, I think people get themselves in trouble. And you can see it in people very quickly. Like, you can kind of sniff it off them, and it's kind of like, you don't even believe this, the things that you're saying. So I think the magic spot is having dreaming incredibly big, but also in a way that deep down you can achieve. Right. Not thinking so big that it's completely impossible. Like, even if you have just 1% confidence that it can be achieved, then it's fine. But then it's just the people, once again, who are, trying to force themselves to being something that they're not. That's where I think it gets a little messy for some people. So I'm a huge believer in, like, dream as big as you can. Like, I talk about it all the time now. Like, I got this billion stuck in my mind. I can't shake it. I'm going to, start marching towards it. I don't know what that journey looks like at all. I'm not a billionaire. I know a few of them, but I haven't sat down to really try to dissect and understand what that means. But the thought process I have is that, I was able to become a millionaire at 30 with no advantages. So, didn't grow up with money, didn't have a network or connections. I was pretty much an outcast, was failing out of school. There was no reason that I should have gotten to where I was at. And somehow I achieved this level of success that for somebody coming from where I was coming from was like, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm 30 and I feel like it's a waste of an opportunity for me not to see what I could achieve by 40. Being in the scenario now where I have the resources and I have the network and the connection and the reputation, like what could I do now with all this? So that's an interesting, and I haven't really fully reconciled it yet. Like I'm still kind of working through it. I'm still figuring a lot of it out, but it's just like, it's kind of hanging out in the back of my mind. So it's kind of like, to your point, like think big, right? Like that's something that I try to always do, but I do also like to wrestle with myself to be like, is this me? Do I think I can do this? And do I want to do it? Or is it something I feel like I should do, or something I feel like is, there? So I think I have a good relationship with that. Like, I think I understand that. I think that, I know why I want to go after these things, but I've definitely been in scenarios before where it's like, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but just things where like I would think big on where I'm like, I don't even want to do this, or I don't think I can do it. So yeah, it's definitely like that self-awareness, I think, becomes like a really interesting part of thinking big and confidence.
Nice. And so now that you are where you are becoming more of a public figure. You're speaking publicly in front of audiences and going to schools. And, one of the things I wanted to ask you, because it may relate to me as a host, as a podcast host, and just kind of as an individual who creates videos, redundancy. So this is one thing where I feel like when you tell a story, right, and you're telling it again and you're telling it again, I feel because you're the only one, you're hearing it every time you say it. How do you deal with this? Like, because I know I've been around you long enough that I've heard your stories a few times. Not that that's a bad thing, but as an individual, I find it, when it comes to me being like that person telling the stories, I feel kind of like the redundancies kind of freaks me out. I'm like, well, people are going to catch on and they're going to know that I'm saying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. So like there's two ways to look at that. One's the practical way. And then the other one's like I guess, kind of deep down your own, motivations for this. So first of all, the number one thing for me is like, I think about it a lot, and like, what do I want to live for? And, what do I stand for? And to me, I think that the one thing I get most proud of is that like, I like to think I'm a real dude. Like I like to think that, I don't hide any parts of my life. In fact, everything that has happened in my life, I want to have people see that in me when I talk and when I do what I do. And that's why I'm kind of like really into this whole idea of trying to express myself more. But I like to think that like I'm a real dude. I like to think that, I'll say it like it is. I'm pretty predictable in that sense. So to me, I have no problem saying the same story over and over again, because I can say it with the same emotion and the same enthusiasm every single time, because it's my life and it's what I've done, and I do want to share my story. So deep down for me, I don't have a problem saying the same story 30 times, because it's not like it gets boring for me. Like whenever I do talk about it, like I kind of live it, and that is something that I enjoy. And I think that I get more comfort and I get more confidence in my story every time I do say it, in the sense that like it's always different. Like it's the facts are always the same, but like in the way I deliver it and who I'm talking to, I got to kind of pick up on different parts of it. And I'm still able to say it every single time because it's real. I lived it. So to me, I don't have a problem with that. And then, so that's the internal side. And that's why I'm trying to, that's why I enjoy doing these talks. Now, the next part of it is, let's take the personal. That's for me personally. Yeah. The factual side is, first of all, if you're doing podcasts and talks, the whole point is that you're now getting exposure to that person's audience. Right. You're making the assumption that your own audience is going to listen to all the stuff that you do, in which case it would be redundant. However, really at the end of the day, when you're doing a lot of these podcasts, the true benefit is that you're getting access to all of those individuals' audiences, right, which probably haven't heard your story before. So in my opinion, you don't really have to worry as much about saying the same things over and over again, as long as they have value and as long as they're true. Have a conversation. To me, I go into a podcast following the host. What's the host want to talk about? The host knows what's interesting. I'm going to share, whatever is relevant to that. So I would just say that, once again, everybody, when it comes to content creation, and I always joke about this, I'm the last person to come to in terms of content advice. I joke about it all the time. I'm like almost failed out of school, millionaire, founder who drives race cars and runs marathons, and wrote a book, and I've got like 2,000 followers. So like, you know what I mean? Like I'm doing something wrong for sure. Yeah. But what I always say is that the reality is that people always think that you as an individual always think that other people care what you're doing, and they don't. They don't give a shit. Nobody cares what you're doing. Like that's just the truth. They care when it shows up on their feed for about 2.2 seconds, and then they're over it. Now, will that piece together a brand or piece together kind of like a feeling about you? Yeah, over time for sure. But the idea that when you post something that anybody actually cares what you posted is just unrealistic. It took me a long time to understand that, but it's similar to your point where it's like, if you have this kind of like insecurity or this, this thing where it's like, shit, I'm saying the same thing over and over again. A, nobody cares. And B, once again, I think that you got to look at it from the perspective that you're here to share your knowledge and story with that person's audience.
Right.
So that's kind of where it is. Now, I don't know if that's the right way or wrong way to look at it, but it's how I've been able to do a lot of my talks, because similarly, I'll go on different podcasts or interviews, and some of them are more specific. Some of them are hardcore business where it's like, yo, what are your tips, tricks, tactics?
Right.
That's a certain type of podcast. Then there's some that are sports related. Then there's some that the next one I'm on is a real estate podcast, right? So it's like, okay, like different things, but always about 20% of it is going to be your story. So, for me, it just really depends, like, once again, on what the host is looking for. Like, how much time do I have to tell my story, and how much time do I have to give the reasonings as to why I think the way I think? If it's a podcast where I have, full range to dive in to who I am and why I am the way I am, and then I can also back that up with the theory behind it, I will do that if I have an hour to talk about who I am and what I've done.
Right.
But if it's someone who's like, hey, okay, cool, give us a quick Coles notes on who you are so we can jump into the business stuff, like the tactics. Well, then I can't come and be like, well, yeah, the real relationship between self-awareness, confidence, and ambition is, I can't do that. I got to be like, hey, like I struggled in school. I, found entrepreneurship, built a company, sold it. That's who I am, and move on to the next. So,
and now it's the start of your next journey, right? Whatever that may be. Do you find yourself, do you still uncover things from your past the more you talk about it?
Every single time. I'm back home right now, so this is a blessing. I feel really lucky about this. So my hometown is Cornwall. It's a small town,
right?
But all my best friends are still there. Like my boys from high school. Like we're still I feel like it's such a blessing to have friends that you have from high school. Like have them still be your boys. So
right.
My boys are still my boys. They're all in Cornwall. My parents are there. My mom is there. My dad's in Ottawa, and it's so trippy. So we have a place. We live in Kitchener, but we have a place in Cornwall.
Okay.
And it's crazy because, I look at it as my own little time warp. So every time I go back there, I kind of get to come back and go to places where, in a past life, I just struggled so much. It was so hard. I had such a hatred for Cornwall from, how hard my early high school was. Then even by the time I graduated, I found my group of friends and, all this, but like I just couldn't wait to get away. And I had a certain outlook and a certain view on life. And I, going back in this, living this life now is just it's a gift. And sometimes it's painful and sometimes it's a lot to think about. And sometimes it's like really introspective, but it's a gift every single time because it always reminds you of who you are. You always spend some time thinking about, oh my God, like the way I was thinking at that time. So just the other day, I made a post about it. Literally, I found this old USB with like an old playlist I had of just like these songs that I completely forgot about.
Nice. And
it just brought back this, like, once again, it was a whole different life that I got to like relive and re-experience. So yeah, no, every time. And I love it. I spend a lot of time trying to think about, my past and, the things that I've done and who I've been and how that has shaped who I am today and how it's going to shape who I am moving forward. I've always said that for me, I think the key to life, and I'm sure this is wrong, but for me it works, is that, every 10 years, the whole point of life is that every 10 years you kind of want to look back at yourself and imagine if the younger you would be a fan. If every 10 years, if 40-year-old Mark looks back, if 30-year-old Mark ran into 40-year-old Mark and 30-year-old Mark is like, oh my God, that's me. Like I did that. Like that's who I am. Then I think you're living a good life. So for me, when I think back about like, 16-year-old Mark, I'm like really comfortable in my own skin right now and living the life the way I'm living, because I know that if that, I live for little Mark, like if 16-year-old Mark saw who we've become and who we are, he would be like, he would lose his shit. And to me, I'm like, yeah, I'm living life in a good way because that's kind of how I look at it. So yeah, I try to spend a lot of time thinking about my past and like trying to reconcile all that.
That's an exciting way of progressing as an individual. Cause it is exciting to think back to yourself 10 years ago and would they be pumped? If not, maybe that's a sign to change something. But I want to kind of you as an individual, I don't know if this is a too grand of a question, but what is your biggest dream in this life? Like, what do you want to do with this life and your purpose, if you will?
Yeah, no, like I don't really know. Like the only thing I know is that, you know, when I die, you know, I want all of the versions of me to look at that person who I was at that time and be like, that's a sick motherfucker. Like that guy is like, that's what's up. Like that's what we did. That was our life. Oh my God. Like, that's just what I want. Like,
that's cool.
That's what it is. And I don't know what that means. Like, is it always going to be bigger and better? Is it more money? Is it more extreme? Is it winning more races? Is it running 200 miles? Is it flying a jet? I don't know. Is it like these kind of like sort of trophies, or is it something more? Is it, you know, I've been, you know, with my wife for, you know, 11 years, like, wow, like you had a 50-year relationship. Oh my God, you know, like you're the best or whatever. Like, I don't know what, that's kind of like the funny part of that journey is like, what is going to be considered cool to the next version of yourself. Right. So I don't know what that is, but that's definitely how I want to live my life, is just at that final moment, I was the version of myself that all the previous me's approved of the most.
Just like the master hand, the mega Marc at the top. Imagine like I'm just picturing like a room full of Marc at 20, 30, 40, 50, all in the same room together, and you're all just hanging out. Yeah. That'd be an interesting.
Well, you know, I think, you know, I wouldn't say I'm super religious, but, you know, people always talk about, you know, only God could judge me. So I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I was like, cause I have this very, like, once again, you know, I really like want to kind of live to honor the life that I've lived, you know, like it's really kind of a big thing for me. And you always got to wonder, like, this whole idea of going and like, you know, are you your own God? Like when you die and you meet God, is it the best version of you that now can judge you? Because only you, only you know everything. Like when you didn't make the right decision, or when you know, didn't do that right thing, only you would really be able to know that. So you got to imagine, like, wouldn't that almost be the ultimate power that you would bow down to? Is kind of like, if God took the form of your ultimate self, whatever that meant, and then, you know, your sort of experience or judgment comes from you having to answer to that person, you know, and it's like, it's just an interesting way to think about it. So I don't think I don't subscribe to that sort of level of thought on it. Because that's kind of more of a future looking, right, where it's like this version that you couldn't even possibly imagine is now kind of laying this judgment on you. I like more of the other way around, where I'm looking retroactively and being like, okay, all the previous versions of me are cool with who I am today. That's kind of the one that I like to live, but nice. You know, might change over time. Who knows?
Nice. So, I mean, amidst all this, there's a lot of amazing advice and insights that you've given us. So thank you for that. What is some kind of practical advice we can leave with our viewers who, you know, they want to creatively carve out their life in the way that suits them best, and then it ties in with their dreams and their purpose? What are some kind of practical tips, if you will, that, you know, could help people be more disciplined, be more confident, be more kind of just disciplined, confident, and, you know, able to be there for the things they need to be there for?
Yeah, I think, like, you know, there's so many things. This one's not like necessarily as like applicable or like, you know, tangible, but I think it's a good, you know, I was just talking to somebody about this, but like, look, you know, first of all, I think you need money to be happy. Like, I don't think money brings happiness, but I think it's a default in terms of like it's very difficult to be happy without money, especially in 2023, especially in Canada. So I would say that, look, here's the reality is that I find so many people who want to get into business, they struggle with, I want to be financially successful, but I want to do something I love. And there's always like this like myth that like find a way to make money doing what you love. And people then take this idea of being a multimillionaire and this idea of what they love and trying to find an intersection. And the problem is you might as well go try to play the lottery. Like, it's the same odds. Being financially successful is one thing. Doing something you love is something. Finding them together is very, very, very difficult. Usually what will happen is that you can do something you love, but it will not allow you to be financially free. You can make a living on it,
right?
But you probably won't be like, hey, I can do whatever I want whenever I want. And on the flip side is you pursuing the path that will get you to a point where you're financially happy probably means you have to go through the trenches. So it's not going to make you happy on a day-to-day basis. So what I always tell people is like, I'm like, listen, it's a very easy equation. Okay. If what makes you happier, does the idea of doing something you love every single day of your life, but it means that you don't necessarily have as many freedoms. Like you're a little bit beholden financially to, just the ebbs and flows of reality and the economy. And you can't really take as many trips as you want. And, maybe you can't have the nice things, but none of that matters because you're doing something you love every day. So is that the priority? Or is the priority, you don't care, you will struggle every day of your life because you want to get to a point where you have so much money that you can just do things that make you happy, that you love. You can take the trip, you can have the nice things, you can do whatever you want. They're both equally valid. They're just both very different. And that's how you decide what you need to do. If you find happiness from the things and having the freedom to do the things, and that having that, that comfort and security that comes with making a lot of money, then guess what? Business is really easy. Stop trying to figure out what you want to do and what you love, and figure out the best possible market opportunity that you can go pursue that has the best possible chance of making you money. It's very straightforward. On the flip side, if you're like, no, I just want to go teach scuba diving in Bahamas and that makes me super, super happy, then guess what? Don't worry about how much it pays you. Don't worry about whatever. Make sure that your basic needs are met and go do the thing that you love the most. It's, the only time there's ever an issue is when people try to do them together. And once again, it happens for some people, but that's like rolling the dice. And like you are going after a lottery. So I find so many people struggle because they're trying to I really want to make a business, but I want to do what I love. Well, what do you want more? Well, I don't know. Well, you're fucked. You're going to spend a year just circling around trying to figure it out, because you're going to find the thing that you love and realize, and you're just going to spend a year trying to figure out how it makes money. And you'll realize that there's not that many ways. Or you're going to, do the thing that makes money and realize you're not happy. And it's like, you just got to be honest with yourself and decide. So for listeners, I would just say, make that decision. What's more important to you? Is it having the financial freedom that, comes after a long period of time? Well, then guess what? Go and research right now. Go check out on Google, figure out what keywords are hot, figure out what products are hot, figure out what YouTube channel or what algorithm you got to break or whatever you got to do to go make money, and go do that and do it hard and do it heavy. On the flip side, if you're the type of person who's like, honestly, that's not what makes me happy. What makes me happy is playing with my reptiles all day. So then great, go research a reptile zoo and find a way to open up a reptile zoo and do what you love every day, knowing that you'll have happiness every day, but you might not be able to go do the vacation every single time or have the nice car. That's,
ties back to self-awareness there.
Yeah.
I like that. One thing that is, it's kind of scary when you root your goals in money. From personal experience, I've found when you reach that point, I've felt like empty-handed. Like I've put everything, okay, I want to make money. I want to make X amount of dollars. You get there. Once you're there, it's like, now what? Have you had that, or is it kind of not? You never really felt that way with it.
Well, it's like I was saying, where when I finally got the money, the new challenge of what do you do when you can do anything comes up.
Right.
For sure. And I think that that's why money's a good meter stick, but it can't be the destination.
Okay.
Money's a means to an end. It's not literally nobody ever wants money because they want to look at a dollar sign in their bank account.
Yeah.
And even if they're like, no, I literally want to do that. I literally want to pull up my phone and see $1 million. Okay. But that's not actually what you're getting. What you want is security, or what you want out of that is, the validation of your success. You don't actually care about the dollar amount in there. So you got to really understand how to think past that. Yeah. I love talking in dollars because dollars is relatable to everybody on the planet. If you talk about, you can really kind of immediately establish where your ambition is at by just throwing a dollar amount out there. And then people kind of understand, where your head is at. But it's never about the dollar amount. It's, for me at least, it was, I want to do whatever I want whenever I want to do it. I want to work when I want to work with who I want to work with what I want on. And then I did have the personal side where I had a huge chip on my shoulder. So I need, I've got a whole laundry list of people I got to prove wrong. And for me, that's another whole reason that I was motivated to make a lot of money. So, it's never the money. It's not the money, but the money is the meter stick or the metric in which we use to, sort of articulate that goal.
Nice. That's cool. That's some amazing advice. I feel like we could sit here and talk all day, but we'll kind of wrap it up soon. Marc, True Founder, just briefly, what is it? Where can people get it?
Yeah. So, just check out marclafleur.com. So it's just MARC. LAFLEUR.com, and you can order a copy. So look, if you're a first time founder, if you're a founder in the trenches, this is essentially my story. of how we built True Local, and it's also the tips and tricks I learned along the way. So it's 16 chapters. It's everything from like the number one most important skill I feel like you need as a founder to be successful, all the way through to should you hire friends or hire for experience, all the way through to how to raise money from angels, VCs, all this type of stuff. There's a ton of True Local anecdotes in there. It was a great experience writing it. And it's the book that I wish that I had whenever I was starting True Local or thinking about getting into business. So you can catch me there on Instagram. So DARKMARC, darkmark_.
The original one was taken, wasn't it?
It was taken. Actually, and it's a dead account. No one's doing anything with it. I've actually DM'd the guy. It drives me crazy.
They didn't answer?
No, I didn't answer. I'm sure I'll get in touch with him one day though. So that's what's going on there. And then, that's it really. Like, I've got a new lab that we're doing a bunch of cool projects with. So that's just db8.com, the letter D, B, and then 8.com. And for any realtors out there, the lab just launched a product. It's a content automation tool. So if in 2024, you're in real estate and you're trying to get your social media game going, but you don't have the time, you don't have the expertise or whatever, you can go to realestatecontent.ai and check it out. It automates all of your content for you. If you are a 1 to 2 on the scale of 10 on social media, this will get you immediately to a 5 and you're ready to rock and roll. So
that's pretty crazy.
We've got on the go. And then what else, man? Check out the racing. Come check us out racing.
Going on, man.
So yeah,
I feel like your baseline is higher than most people's like highest potential.
Yeah, well, it's once again like it's trying to bring a lot of it back in to make sure that it's all sort of moving in the same direction. But yeah, man, I like it. I enjoy it. I'm fortunate to have an amazing group of people that help support me in all these things. Each one of these things I've mentioned has an entire team behind it. I got my wife behind me, supporting everything that we're doing, and a great group of friends and family. So it makes it easier to do big things.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing kind of where you go next. I mean, I feel like it's an interesting time to chat with you, because from here on out, I feel like you're just going to be blazing a whole new trail into unknown territory. What you just spoke about sounds really interesting. The AI content thing. Is it generating content or is it distributing it, or both?
So no, literally, long story short, so realestatecontent.ai, what it's going to do is it'll connect to your social media accounts. What it'll do is you can choose a theme for the day, the week, or the month, and then it will bring up hyper relevant topics based on your theme. So essentially, if you're a real estate agent, look, you guys got to get your social media game figured out. Real estate agents really fall behind on it. Nobody cares about your just listed or just sold postings. What they do care about though is value added information in your neighborhood. So if you live in Ottawa, people want to know where the best trails are. They want to know what the cute little bakeries are at. They want to know all these things. So we know that takes a lot of time to create that type of content. So for example, you can go online, we're in Ottawa right now, and you can go ahead and say, hey, look, the top 5 things to do in December in Ottawa. And this thing will then bust that theme up into relevant subtopics, and it'll generate your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and it'll write a blog for you all on those themes. And they're like rock solid good stuff. Like the prompt engineering on it's amazing.
So you put prompts in and it gives you this back?
You don't put any prompts in. We've done all the prompt engineering. So it'll just say like, what do you want to write about? So for this week,
right,
you put your theme in and then just hit enter. Well, you would choose what day you want to post and what platform you want to post on. No prompting. You're not going in there writing, hey, I want you to act like this. Like the whole platform's already set up. So it's and the reason being is because we tailored it specifically to real estate.
Right.
So we've trained the model. So we've already got all the prompts already built in behind the scenes. All you got to do is put your theme in and it's going to start giving you relevant content. So once again, when you look at agents, agents that are even just trying to get into content, maybe they do it for a week. They post 3 times a week for 1 week, then 3 times a week the next week, then twice the week after, then once the week after, then they just stop.
Right.
This literally makes it so you can have quality content going out every single day. And you can use that to kind of be like your base. And then maybe once a week you post like a really, really good, thoughtful one that you write up yourself. But this just acts as like an amazing way to default and build relationship, to be honest, with your audience. So many people are like, oh, you can't use AI content. It's not from, it's not whatever. And it's like, no, it's just because you suck at writing prompts. If you write really, really good prompts and you make sure that you're pulling information from the internet that's relevant to people, there's nothing wrong with having, an AI write an article. we're not trying to come out here and come up with an original story. We just want to help you with facts in your neighborhood and in your area. And this is what this AI can do. So it's been good.
Is it a paid service? And do you own the content that it generates for you?
Yeah, use it. It's a great question. You even asked that. Yeah. So we'll generate the content. Like, we have access to the content. Of course, it's, once again, Facebook posts, Instagram, stuff like that, but go post it, do whatever you want to do with it. It's not like creative content in the sense of like,
is it copy or is it?
We do copy and images.
And images. Okay.
Yeah. So it's $99 a month. So the way that we look at it is like, you can have your entire month's worth of content. So your Facebook posts, Instagram posts, Twitter posts, and a blog that goes with it every single day of the month if you wanted, for $99 a month. Like, that's a joke.
Pretty insane.
Most people are paying $100 for one post nowadays, right?
Wow.
The images is using DALL-E 3, so it's one of the stronger text to image models that are out there. So we always say that the images are there, but you can just swap them for whatever images you want. The reason we did that is because we always encourage people to use their own images. That's just a way better way to build a relationship. But as a default, you have images that come with it. You can use them, do whatever you want to do with them.
That's crazy.
And yeah, so it's been really good. And
really interesting.
For us, yeah, it's really kind of just getting started. And of course, the real value comes from the fact that you can automate the whole thing. So it will connect to your social media accounts. So as long as you have a business Facebook or Instagram, it'll literally generate the post for you. You can review and edit it, and then you can schedule it, and then you just set it and forget it, and you're good. So the idea for the product is that we feel that real estate agents can now spend 10 to 20 minutes a month, have all of their monthly content taken care of, and not have to come back again for another month when they want to go generate the next month worth of content. That's like our goal, is 10 to 20 minutes a month, and you're getting a whole month's worth of value done.
That's pretty crazy.
It's been good.
So it's live?
It's live now.
Cool. So I'm going to link all of Marc's. I mean, everything's available on your website, right? Everything can come through marclafleur.com. So I'll put all of Marc's stuff down there. Marc, as you have learned today, has many, many interesting traits. His energy is inspiring. I want to go run a marathon after this episode and race an AMG. But check out everything about Marc in the description below. I'll link that below. I'll link our sponsors. Pano Media, Midnight Hour Studios will be down in the description below. Marc, thank you so much for being here, man.
Dude, thanks for having me, man. I love reconnecting. I love having these like organic conversations.
Yeah.
Man, I remember you did the first testing. You saw me in the car, the BMW, the first time I got it after the winter upgrades and right before that season where we had a great season. So like, dude, we go back. So I'm happy to come here and
cool.
share some more stuff. So
it's cool how much has happened. And I mean, it's been inspiring to see your journey as someone I'm on a similar, there's similarities in our journeys with ties to motorsports and, fitness and business. And so it's cool to see and know someone like you. I'm grateful to know someone like you because it's inspiring. Maybe one day I'll be able to hike a mountain, race an AMG, and run a marathon in the same month.
Dude, whenever you're ready to do any of that stuff, let me know, man, because we'll go make it happen.
I appreciate that, man. And thank you, viewers, listeners. Thank you so much for watching. This has been The Creatives. A little bit of a monumental episode in that it is our 25th episode. We've come a long way in just a year, 25 episodes. So thank you to all of you who are listening, watching. The podcast is available on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And we post clips on Instagram as well. So check it out wherever you like to enjoy content, and get in touch with us if you have any recommendations for guests. If you have questions you'd like to ask our guests, get in touch. The Creatives is intended to be a sort of kind of community that belongs to all of us. So even if you just want to have a chat about creativity and not be on the show, reach out. Would love to chat. This has been The Creatives Podcast with Marc Lafleur. Thank you for watching, and remember to enjoy yourself. Peace.